Good morning, everyone. And I'm not exactly sure how this is going to pan out. Um, it may turn out to be the beginning of me getting off my ass and finally collating all these fragments of videos together and editing them into content, or not. But one of the one of the ideas I've been playing with is there are a lot of automotive channels that show you, secrets and tips and tricks and stuff like that. Um, I just had the idea of showing you what a day in the life could be, and so I started a little bit of that, and that should be coming if I can get around to it. But this is part of it. I'm off today, and that's probably why I have enough time to vent like this. I rant infrequently, but when I do, it's because of situations like this. So I have a client, a referral from another client of mine, um, who had gotten some work done elsewhere, had issues with it, and asked me to look at it. So while I looked the job over, I'm like, okay, everything is fine. In the back of my mind, and this is something that other business owners or other contractors, whatever it is you deal, if you're on commission, this is something that some people can relate to and some people can't. Um, if you punch in, do your job, work for somebody, and leave and get a paycheck, for you, it doesn't matter who does the job. As long as the job gets done, we're all part of a team. That's great. For people who are commission based or for business owners, whatever, it's a little different. If I invest time into you as a client or a customer, and you take whatever the fruits of that time invested and give that to somebody else to profit over, that's one of the risks we take. But needless to say, looking the truck over, everything seemed fine. But I did notice that she had an issue that was covered by an extended warranty, a warranty extension. And I said, hey, before you time out or mile out on this issue, you might want to make time to get it done. And I say this because usually, when warranty extensions are made, they're not made voluntarily. A lot of times it's either with the threat of legal action or as the result of a class action lawsuit, in which case uh, it's just smart to take advantage of the extension. So in this case, I said, hey, guess what? I work from 8 to 5. Come in there, request me to work on your vehicle, and either wait or get a loaner, and let's get this ticked off. Let's get this checked. So I had a little bit of I don't know if I'm going to post that one yesterday or not because the lighting was terrible and I went off tangent. And so my car had a misfire, and I figured it was a coil that I noticed had some oil soaking or burned issue. There's a long story behind that. But yesterday morning, last night I pulled the car in the garage to put it on. I was too tired, so I figured I would do it on my way out. And on my way out, I remember the car was in the garage, so I started working on that. And it doesn't take long to put the coil in. It takes maybe 5 minutes. But I looked at my phone, and it was 8:05 or something. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be late for work. I don't live too far away, and but she was already there. And our agreement was, pick a day, let me know what day, let me know when you're coming in, so I'll be there on time. She called and said, what days do you work? I told her, and that was the last I heard until I saw a text message that said, oh, I'm here. I sent her a shot of me putting the coil back in saying, had car issues, we'll be there shortly. Between putting the coil in, driving the 5 minutes it takes to get to work, and getting up front, apparently the shortly had been after her vehicle had gotten checked in, so the car was already in the shop. Early morning, there's not a wait, which is a tip for those of you who want to get your car worked on. If you can drop it off the night before, it's one of the first cars to get worked on. No wait, or if you get there early. Needless to say, she was done by the time I got there. Like, car was already in the hands of somebody else working on it. So for those of you, and this is something else that a lot of I follow a few people on YouTube, a lot of in this community, the auto community. Some people have experience with the automotive dealership. It is supposed to be the zenith of technical know-how and efficiency of repair and specialization. One of the reasons why I teach automotive technology is because I know that's not true. And part of the problem is, and a coworker of mine was talking yesterday. He saw something somewhere, and it's apt here. Skilled labor is not cheap, and often cheap labor is not skilled. It's just that. So ultimately, to maximize profit margins in such a profitable yet literally cost intensive, uh, uh, business as a dealership is, you look to pay the least and get the most, and that's what the administration, management does. Um, so it's unfortunate that while it does have the label of being a dealership, there is no guarantee. I'm sorry. I'm human too, and with everything that I know and everything that all the experience I have, I can still mess up. But what you find is with seasoned and well salted technicians, they have a code of their own. Okay, especially when you work commission, flat rate, whatever you want to call it. There's no job you want to do twice. So whatever you do, you make sure it's done right and you move on. The problem here with dealerships, especially, is that because of the anonymity or the disconnect between the customer and the technician, you can come in, talk to one person, there's a handoff. And so ultimately, if things go sideways, fingers get pointed and it'll be at everybody else. So, just to give context to what I'm about to say next, is that if you need a service done and you do not directly interface with the person providing the service, it's weird to me that almost every other business or industry or facet of life, regardless of the middlemen, you interface directly with who you are getting the product or service from, except in the automotive industry. Very, very few of the people who come through my dealership, and I've worked at three or four, um, and service places, very few of them interface directly with the clown who may be, behind the curtain, wrenching on their vehicle, banging with a hammer. Very few. And so the idea that you don't know the person, or the, and this is key. You don't need to like the person, but to be able to evaluate. For instance, there was a little, what do you call those things? Conundrum. What do you call it? Enigma. If you needed emergency surgery, would you prefer a first class student out of med school, right? All A's and everything, who aced med school, but just green out of med school? Or would you prefer a surgeon, a seasoned surgeon who was drunk? Which would you prefer? And to each person their own choices. But here's the thing: you might not like the person who's doing the work, but to be able to assess their competency, if you've never met them, how do you know if you don't know them? And that's the problem I find at the dealership. You talk to service writers, service advisors, service consultants, whatever you want to call them. You talk to one person who interviews you if they're good at their job, right? Asks you open-ended questions, doesn't go off of the formula of this normally goes bad, oh, you must have this, feeding you, whether directly or subliminally, the way to answer the question. And if they do their job right, there's enough information for the technician to go off of. But at the same time, like I said, now this just goes into a pile and it's disseminated, without fear or favor or whatever, just randomly, unless you request. And that was my instruction. Request that I work on your vehicle. Let's prepare to get you into a loaner, or you will wait. I told her how long it would take. Should take a couple of hours. I believe she was off, worked a half day. There was no rush. Before I got there, somebody else had done it, blah, blah, blah. Cool, great. At least it got done. You don't have to pay about $1,600. It's free. On with your life. When I got off there, I think I went home, got a bite to eat, and was getting ready to head out to go teach. And I get a phone call. Are you still at work? I'm like, no, I've left for the day. There's another story behind the day as it went after that anyway, but we'll get to that. Apparently there's a noise now, and the only reason why I'm making this video, this happened yesterday, so I'm really not concerned about, I'm really not concerned about, the timeline, because I didn't have the information I have now yesterday. So I said, hey, you're already going back there. I'm not there. But here's what I will say. If you say the noise wasn't there before and it's there now, have them double check. It might be something simple. It might not be. But, don't. Here's something else that I have to say. Don't get too busy. If you don't make time for it, right? If you don't make time for maintenance, maintenance will make you make time. It's not the actual quote. I saw it somewhere. If I remember it correctly, I'll try and fix this part of the video. But yeah, needless to say, she brought it back last night. Apparently, she has bad wheel bearings. Now, this morning, I get a phone call from the advisor that she spoke to yesterday. He calls me, texts me, says, this lady's back with the noise. She needs wheel bearing and she's blaming us. And the first thing that I asked him before he started on his rant was, hold up. Are you familiar with the procedure that is involved in replacing the parts that she got replaced yesterday? He said no. And that's a fundamental problem I find with a lot of service writers and advisors. They do undergo topical training, surface training for what we do in the back, but a lot of them either willfully or otherwise are ignorant of the inner workings of what we do, and that's not their job description, but it does help in understanding things. So he says no, and I said, well, let me bring you up to speed real fast. To do that job, you have to loosen the axle nuts. On front wheel driven wheel bearings, the support for the wheel bearings is through the axle. Let's see, the outer joint, the CV joint being tight. You have to loosen that nut to perform this job. If when the job is complete, those axle nuts are not tightened down, the wheel bearings will destroy themselves. There's nobody who may be watching this or listening to me rant right now who will not know this. Doesn't take long for them. You over tighten the axle nut, things can also go bad, but it takes longer to happen. The end of the snout of the outer joint could snap from the tension and all of that. The wheel bearings, the casing's really stout on these wheel bearings, so it's possible, depending on the kind of bearings you have. These are sealed. If you had tapered, maybe a little different, but ultimately torque is important in this instance. It's very important. Too much, too little, the bearing will fail. She brought it back. They tell her she needs wheel bearings. That's the end of it. Until this morning. She's blaming us. Why not? She says it wasn't there before. Wait, are you sure that the axle nuts were tightened? He doesn't know. Of course, he didn't work on the car. The technician who worked on the car wasn't, I don't believe, would have been there when she came back. Did somebody pull it in real fast, realize the axle nut was loose, and tighten it, and then say, oh, we need wheel bearings? I mean, he didn't do, we run shifts. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. So there's a morning shift and an afternoon shift, and so at some point, he's not going to bend over a barrel for somebody else. If he decides to determine, hey, you need wheel bearings, that's his job. What was the noise? Blah, blah, blah. Now, did anybody ask him what he did? Nobody. I'm not there. And this is why I titled the video what I did. Following instructions is always cheaper. Time, money, whatever. I gave instructions to request me and wait for me or get a loaner. Very simple instructions, not followed. Now, whether the advisor did something that she wasn't aware of, you know what I'm saying? She requested me, he didn't get me, that's his fault, so on and so forth. I have a beef with them too sometimes, because ultimately the advisor gets paid regardless of who works on it, right? I only get paid if I work on it. So to him, it doesn't matter who works on it. If she requested me and he dispatched it or caused it to go in the shop without waiting for me, you know, that's on them. Um, but now you're asking if I'll look at it and inspect it. No, I'm not. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that for her. I'm not doing that for him. I'm not doing that for anybody. And here's the reason why. I know the pitfalls that can come from not doing jobs correctly. I'm not the fastest technician out there. I hope I'm not the slowest. I do have my faults, but I try to be as thorough as I can be to mitigate the frequency, limit the frequency at which I get comebacks or faults or failures. I will tell you right now, the conversation in the video that I don't know if I'm going to post now or not because the lighting was bad, but the audio is still good. Um, the coil I put on my car on my way to campus last night while I was filming this phone call, it started to misfire, right? Like dead cylinder. And I'm like, did I get a bad coil? This is bad. I don't even have the old coil with me to swap out. And I get to campus, and at the end of the night, I said, let me check this. And something said, check the connector, make sure you put it on right. And I got distracted, and I didn't. And I get all the way back home, and I get ready to swap the old one back in because it was occasionally misfiring. This one was a dead miss now. And I top the cover off. The connector is just sitting there loose. So, I'm not above mistake. I can admit that. The thing is that if I do that to my own car, it's very possible I'll do that to yours. I'm not above that. But the thing is that because I know the consequences of my actions, especially if it's for somebody else's car, that may come back on me and I might, have to spend time and money on, I double check. Okay? This is my car. I made a mistake. I fixed it. If it's going to cost me a catalytic converter or whatever it's going to cost me, I can't remember if this generation of car, if the injectors get cut off once it senses a misfire, which would have saved me. If it didn't do that, then I might have shortened the lifespan of my catalytic converter. But I can't blame that on anybody but myself. And this is one of the reasons why when I work at the dealership, I'm not the fastest, because if I'm not sure I'm done, I check. And this is what would have happened with her vehicle. I would have worked slow enough to double check my work. She would have been late for whatever appointment if she didn't make the time, and you would have been upset, but we wouldn't be having this discussion. Needless to say, we're having it now, and I'm hands off from everybody. I asked you to request me, that didn't happen. Whoever, it was a simple thing. So ultimately, I don't know where everybody may land on this, but I'm just a little bit upset because I foresaw and I can't really say one way or the other whether or not. So as forceful, for instance, my daughter was with me while I was having the conversation with the advisor, and when I got off the phone, she was like, "Beat people over the head with repetition much," and I'm like, the problem is I may come off forceful or passionate, whatever you want to call it, but there's a reason. Because if you tell people do something and they half hear you or half listen, or they do two out of the three things and it's all three that need to prevent something bad happening, and you left the window open, the reason why I give the instruction is because I know what can happen. So in dealing with people who believe in being optimistic and that the sun will always shine, when the storms hit their worst and do their worst and people complain, I'm really not about cleaning up the mess afterwards. And people at that point, they're like, oh, well, you don't want to help. No, my help was pre-disaster, pre-confusion. It's cheaper. Follow my instructions, take my advice, use it. No headaches. She been at work now, car beat. Maybe I would have screwed up too, who knows? But because I've done it before and I know, chances are that I would have got done with it like, check this, check that, drive it, whatever. And I've been known to pay for these things when I've broken them, so she would never have known. I would have made the mistake, probably made the video. But yeah, this is getting kind of long-winded now. It's 20 minutes in. What happened and in other instances, I'll probably talk about when I do my daily vlog either tomorrow or whatever. But for those of you who are here listening to this, hopefully this gives you an insight of what happens on the day-to-day, the stuff aside from fixing the cars that you guys might not get to see. This is 100 Tech. See you guys later. Ooh, I'm all in the way. All right. How do I stop this thing?